The Five Nights at Freddy's saga is a franchise packed with many mysteries, enigmas, and things that, to this day, have no answers whatsoever. That's why in today's video, I've decided to compile 5 huge mysteries from throughout the franchise that, so far, don't have a clear answer. Without further ado, let's get to it. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, and let's begin. The Blob. The Blob is one of the most mysterious figures in the modern lore of Five Nights at Freddy's, one that truly holds many more questions than answers. Its appearance is that of a gigantic tangle of wires and animatronic parts, where the heads of various animatronics we've seen throughout the FNAF games rest, such as Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, Circus Baby, Mangle, and even the puppet. It's somewhat reminiscent of Molten Freddy in concept, as they are practically the same, both having Funtime Freddy's head as their main mask. But although they look similar, they are not the same entity. It first appears in FNAF Security Breach, in the final part of this chapter, as that gigantic thing found in the deepest pit of the Prophecyx. Although we see it directly, and even Glamrock Freddy mentions it, it was never really emphasized and remained an unexplained enigma. Later, in the same game, we would see it drag Burntrap into the depths, while the rest of the Prophecyx began to collapse and burn down completely. Then in FNAF Ruin, this thing is mentioned. It's mentioned that this thing is responsible for the establishment's collapse by moving and digging tunnels throughout the structure, causing it to cave in. And it appears briefly the moment Cassie enters the building. However, it isn't mentioned again, and the character has remained a complete mystery for now. We don't know if it's a reimagining of Molten Freddy, or if it will have a much more important role throughout the saga, leaving it only to our imagination. The C virus. This is one of the most interesting and, at the same time, underused concept in Five Nights at Freddy's. This thing is mentioned for the first time in the cancelled FNAF augmented reality game, FNAF Special Delivery. It's known to be a virus that affected the Fazbear Entertainment System, quite similar to Glitchtrap, but completely different from the Mimic in every way. This curious virus was mentioned within this game, and, as shown in the messages and letters sent to the player, it seemed to have a vital importance and role for the game that was never able to flourish. Many theories were created at the time to explain what this supposed virus that had attacked the augmented reality game was, from it being Cassidy, the soul inside Golden Freddy, to some who thought it was the virtual manifestation of Charlie, the soul inside the puppet. The curious thing is that these descriptions were quite valid, as both names began with the letter C, but people were much more suspicious of Charlie, since in the trailer for the game itself, you can see a Lefty sprite for a few brief moments. A character scrapped from the game, who would surely have brought us the answer to this great enigma. However, unfortunately, we never got the answer we wanted, as the game would end up being cancelled on the 14th of March 2024. So the answer was left up in the air, and the enigma of an antagonist parallel to the Mimic that emerged within this game can, with almost total certainty, be said to have been completely decanonized. It's likely that, as such, Scott will never take it into account again, as it didn't have the same impact as Glitchtrap, and to this day, it wouldn't make much sense to reintegrate it into the story. So it became another unresolved enigma within the FNAF saga. The Shadow Animatronics. This is one of the biggest mysteries that still remains in the FNAF franchise without a clear answer for almost 11 years now. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 came out a very long time ago, and with it, many questions that to this day still have the community scratching their heads trying to decipher them. One of those questions is what exactly the Shadow Animatronics are, who were introduced in this game as a hallucination that could affect the player. These are Shadow Bonnie, also known as Roof's Fask, who appears as a dark entity that can randomly appear in your office and cause your game to crash. The other entity is Shadow Freddy, who has no official name besides the one given by the community and only appears once all the withered animatronics have left the parts and service room. They have also appeared in other games such as Five Nights at Freddy's 3, being part of the Easter eggs and a minigame, and in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, they were seen for a brief second as the shadows cast by a Fredbear and Spring Bunny. Although they had a small debut in FNAF World, it wasn't until Ultimate Custom Night and FNAF R Special Delivery that Shadow Bunny was given a much more important role, appearing as an entity made of remnant that serves precisely as a guardian of this dark substance. However, although this is a fairly convincing explanation, there is still no real consensus within the community to explain who is who in reality. It's thanks to these brief appearances that the community has come up with many theories about them, from them being the souls of the workers who were trapped in the springlock suits, to them being the agony and torment of the children. But although all these explanations work, the truth is there was never an official canonical explanation for them. William Afton's wife. Perhaps one of the most interesting mysteries surrounding FNAF, sister location, and the history of the entire Afton family is who the mother of Michael, the crying child, and Elizabeth Afton was. Unless William adopted them, he must have had a relationship with a wife or girlfriend who was the mother of his children. However, even if this were the case, she is never mentioned or appears in any video game or novel. Not even in the Five Nights at Freddy's film is this woman mentioned, as Vanessa herself, who in this canon is William's daughter, never mentions her mum. The only two clues we have about William's wife is the animated television series that Michael Afton usually watches at his house after each workday, The Immortal and the Restless, where a couple, a vampire named Vlad and a woman named Clara, constantly argue about taking care of a small child, half vampire, half human. This could be a reflection of the stormy relationship between the two of them. For many years, the community has held the theory that William Afton may have created the Ballora animatronic in the image and likeness of his wife. And even the dialogues from the game and from Ultimate Custom Night could suggest this, where she herself recounts how William hides behind her walls making animatronics, or how he wanted to let her pass through to his office. But despite being a very convincing and accepted theory in the community, there has been no official explanation based on it. FNAF 6 minigame. The biggest mystery in FNAF to date, the minigame we saw in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, Midnight Motorist. This minigame has caused immense headaches in the community, as it's one of the few things about which we could safely say it could be literally anything. In this minigame, we briefly drive a purple vehicle on a road in the rain, until, taking on the role of an orange man, we head to a bar or restaurant known as Junior's. From here, a green man will refuse us entry, and we can visit a site that looks like a grave. We can also go to our house, where a person watching television will tell us not to bother them, forcing us to knock on the door of someone who has clearly escaped through the window, where we also see footprints. This minigame is so confusing and ambiguous that it could literally be about anyone. The most accepted theory is that it's William Afton arriving home after the murder of Charlie, which we saw in FNAF 6 itself, which happened during a rainstorm. However, other theories made by the community consider the possibility that it could be Rory's father, a boy we saw in the FNAF novels, that it could be Henry Emily arriving home depressed, or some even have the wild idea that it's Edwin. The truth is, it could really be anyone, as it is currently the most confusing and inexplicable minigame in the entire FNAF saga, one that not even Scott himself has wanted to explain. Who do you really think it is? Let me know down in the comments. This video has ended, but if you'd like to see more unanswered mysteries within the FNAF saga, let me know below with a big like. And if we reach the figure of 2,000 likes, I'll make a second part with many more mysteries. With nothing more to say. See you next time.